Why does God allow suffering? Have you ever wondered why people suffer sometimes? So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why I am recommending for you to read. Things we read about in Job is very relevant to us today because many of us Christians would at one point in our lives face a difficult situation, and we can see examples of how to go about being overcomers when we are in those situations in the book of Job. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at or giving you those 5 reasons why I'm encouraging you to read. So the first reason is that it is a story, a full and complete story. We see the reason for the suffering in the book, and we see the suffering Job actually going through the process and then the outcome. I'm just going to read what I said. I've written in my notes here on the computer. I said that unlike some poetic books or letters that you find in the scriptures, like in Psalms, and you have a lot of dramatic things being said there, in Job, you can actually see the reason for the drama and the experiences that Job was going through and why he was making those utterances. And I found that very fascinating. And the fact that it makes it an engaging and easy, makes it engaging and easy to follow, which means anybody can read it, even somebody that is new to reading or studying the scriptures. Also, you can see the structure. You see the prologue, the trial. You see how Satan had that conversation with the Lord, what about Job, and God vouching for Job, and then the incidences that happen as a result of the conversation that happened between Satan and the Lord, and also conversation between Job and his friend. And it just makes it come alive. It just makes the book very active and engaging. So for that reason, I would encourage you to read the book. Maybe you have read the book of Job, all of it or part of it. Put it in the comments so then we can see, and let me know if you've read all of it or part of it, or you are intending to read it. I've been able to encourage you to read the book. The second reason why I would like you to read the book of Job is because you can see the reason for the challenge that Job faced. It was as a consequence of the conversation between the Lord and Satan. And maybe looking at this, or we having this knowledge, would change your perception of why some things happen. Because for me, when I look at that situation with Job, it made me to see that maybe not in all cases, but I think it is in most cases, that whatever it is we are experiencing, it is a consequence of what's happening in the spirit world. And we can see that the conversation was in the spirit, and then we saw the impact or the consequence of it, or as the event that resulted from that conversation in the physical, which meant Job had to lose everything. So in my life, having read literally reading the book of Job now, or looking at it from that point of view, it's made me to think a little more about the things happening around me, and knowing fully well that the things that happen in the physical are consequences of events that happen in the spirit. Let me know your thoughts about this. And I'm asking the question, why is this happening to me? The book of Job and the things that happened before Job started experiencing all those laws makes me to at least it brings some the fact that the reason, what we may think will be the reason for something, may not necessarily be the reason for it. Because the Job's friend that came to see him, they were thinking, oh, he must have done something for him to, for all of these things, bad things to have happened to him. But we know better because we're seeing the whole picture. We've presented with the whole picture. They didn't in that time when they came to see Job. And I think this may help us sometimes to answer the question why. But some people may still think that, is it okay? Can they really trust God even in a situation like that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. We could see Job expressing his inner thoughts. You know, it was sometimes here, high up here. At other times it was low. It was just all over the place with his emotions running wild. And who wouldn't feel that way with the scale of what he had to experience? And this makes him to be relatable to us. This is what I think, because we can see his emotions and everything he was feeling. He said, particularly when those three friends of his came to visit him. So I've got a question for you. Have you ever gone through a situation so hard that you're starting to question God? This may be a book that will help you to put things into perspective. So do you think it was right for Job to challenge God the way he did? Because there were times where he was so confused and he said things about, it did not cost God, but he was demanding that the Lord would speak to him, possibly to explain the situation that he's going through. The third reading I would encourage you to read the book of Job is because you would see Job's humanity coming through. Because very many times I think that Christians feel that they have to be superhuman or they have to be perfect people. In fact, my understanding of perfection or being perfect has changed, has shifted significantly through even though I had an inclination towards this understanding before, but reading again what we have recorded in the book of Job makes me to just consolidates my understanding of what it means to be perfect. Because let's see, I've got it in my Bible here in first Job, the first chapter, when the Lord was speaking to Satan. See how he described Job. And the Lord said unto Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a perfect and an upright man? So if the Lord said he's perfect, who are we to say he's not perfect? The truth, though, is that Job did not see himself that way. Neither his friends. Well, relatively, Job believed he hadn't done anything to warrant that situation he found himself. But his friends were convinced that he must have done, engaged in something really terrible for that scale of calamity to come upon him. But we know better. So when you read the book of Job, I'm hoping that you will find this as well. It has helped me to put into perspective that the way God sees us is not necessarily the way we see ourselves. And I hope you find this as well. So if you're getting value from this video, can you please give us a thumbs up, and also to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on your notification button so you can receive an alert when a new video is made. Fourth reading I would like you to read the book of Job is because I found after some time that I almost was thinking that I was reading the book of Psalms with the vivid expressions that, Job and his friends painted, very poetic, and it went on and on and on. But at one point, I realized that the difference between what I'm reading and the cases that we'll find, or verses that are poetic like that you find in the book of Psalms, is that in the case of Job, we were living the context. We understood why he was in that state and saying things like that, or in cases where it was his friends that were talking. Unlike when you're reading the book of Psalms. For instance, I remember, I think it's Psalm 51 or 53, I can't really remember now, where David said, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, O Lord, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Now, that psalm is stood alone in the book of Psalms, whereas in the case of Job, when you have poetic verses like that, you can see that Job was reacting to a situation, or his friends otherwise doing the same thing. Compared to the cases where you have in the book of Psalms, it was much, much later when I, studied and realized that the psalm that I said earlier, where David was praying for God's forgiveness, he wrote that when he committed the sin of adultery and was waiting on the Lord for forgiveness. It would probably have been most ideal if that was in the book of Kings, or Chronicles where that incident was recorded. So it would have flown together and flow together and give you the context of the situation of where how the psalm came about. And you don't find things like that in Job because you're living the experience. And because of that, it makes it more relatable and more I don't know the right word to say now. Maybe you just you can understand it. But I have written two sentences saying, unlike Psalms, we get to see why Job says the things he said. And for example, in Job 13, verse 15, he said, though he slay me, yet I will trust in him. We can see that he made that statement in a situation where he was high and then low and then high. So he was discouraged, but then later he realized that, well, I still trust in God. I'm not going to curse God. And that's why he made that kind of utterance. So I've got two questions for you. The first is, have you ever read a verse from Job or thought it sounded like Psalm if you have read the book of Job? So put an answer to that for me in the comments. And do you think understanding the context of a verse makes it more powerful? So this would be for people that would have read some verses in Psalms and they would be wishing that I wish I had understanding of this, which would have come more easily if you have it in context. The fifth reason that I would like you to read the book of Job is because I think there are plenty of relationship being highlighted in the book. I think the first is the relationship between the Lord and Job, and we see his relationship with his children. And we also see his relationship with the wife that encouraged him to curse God, after all that calamity fell on him. And lastly, we see the relationship between his friends and him and the trust that Job had in the Lord held him because he had a relationship with God and he trusted God. And we see him being, sort of being let down by his wife, I would say. Also by his friends, because they came to sympathize or empathize with him, but would not, allow him to bear his, to just be there and commensurate with him, because we have several cases in in their conversation where Job would say to them, if you don't have anything good to say, then be me not speak. I should find that verse and read it. I'm reading from Job chapter 16, verse 1. I start from verse 1. It says, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters, he was calling his friend. You all are, all three of them. Should words of wind have an end? And then somewhere he then said, I think it's in verse 5, it says, verse 4, it says, I also will speak as you do. In other words, he knows as much as they do. If your soul were in my soul's place, listen to this, I could heap up words against you and shake my hands at you, which is what they were doing actually, not in reality, but in their attitude. Now, hear what Job said. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief. They weren't doing that to him. They were bent on letting him see that he's guilty. He's not righteous. He must have done something bad. That's why that's happening to you. No, what do you call that word? Being no empathy on their part towards Job. And see that relationship, the experience that Job had was, brought out so many things I would say about the relationship with, number one, his wife. Of course, the children were no more. His relationship with God, God still maintained that is perfect, and his relationship with his friends, and so that is another reason why I would like you to read the book of Job, because you see a lot of it and the dynamics of the relationship there, and it just even reads like a good story. Forget about the fact that you're reading it as you're reading the Bible, but it's a good story to read. So I hope I have been able to convince you to read the book of Job. And if you are going to, commit to reading the whole book of Job, please leave a comment for me down so that I would know, and let me know how you're doing with your reading. And I'm also planning, because I've been really encouraged by reading the book of Job, because I know that all of us in this world have challenges from time to time. Nothing like Job had to face, but nevertheless, we still experience and face challenges. And so I was encouraged a lot by the words that either himself or the friend spoke at different times, and also about the poetic way verses that I could see from there. So my plan is to do a series on the encouragements that I've gotten from the book of Job, and also to look at the verses that I consider that could be used as prayer points. And I'll be making series of videos on that, because there's so many verses or statements that those people made that I thought we can actually use them as prayer points. And I hope that this video has been useful to you and you found it beneficial. If so, please give us a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. And also turn on your notification button so you can receive an alert when a new video is being released. Until next time, I say unto you, search your scriptures for those nuggets, and God bless.